3 minutes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sure.
So hello everyone. Thanks a lot for joining in. We'll just quickly start in another 1 minute. So hello everyone. Wishing you all a very happy Independence Day, and thanks a lot for joining in for our webinar on beginners approach to UX. So we have Gyan from innovators.org who will be moderating today's session. So Gyan, over to you.
Thank you, Shubham, and thank you, Skillenza, for being able to host us today. I know that it's a holiday, but thanks a lot for hosting us, as well as thank you everyone for joining us today. Wish you all a very happy Independence Day. My name is Gyan, and and another colleague of mine, Padma, along with a team of volunteers, are leading the GHCI Codeathon effort. For this year 2020, and first of all, I would like to thank everybody for registering for the codeathon, as well as being able to submit the ideas. If you haven't submitted your ideas, then you pretty much just have another day. So please feel free to start submitting your ideas, and make sure that you're able to participate in the codeathon. I just want to quickly talk a little bit about the codeathon. I'm not gonna talk about the introduction and things like that, since all of you are already familiar. And if you can see my screen, there are two broad topics that I want to touch upon. One is just emphasizing on the theme again, right? So this year, the theme for the Codeathon is revolving around the umbrella topic of providing solutions for post COVID-19 life, right? So there are two subtopics under this which we have chosen. One is being able to provide innovative solutions in the domain of education, right? So all of us have gone, or rather, are trying to go digital because of COVID, right? Education industry is facing one of the biggest challenges. especially in remote areas like villages where there isn't much access to internet, or there isn't much awareness about how to access these educational materials over internet, right? Can you build something innovative for them, right? So education in terms of social distancing, improve collaboration or video conferencing solutions to facilitate distance learning better, creative solutions to help students in the regional areas. You can also think about it in terms of having to create educational material in regional content, sorry, in regional languages. Rather, create regional content in regional languages to help facilitate these people to learn easier, right? And also think of it from the perspective of candidates looking for jobs, right? How does the post COVID world affect them? And can you build anything innovative on these lines? The second theme that we're thinking about is not just post COVID, but even overall in general, innovative solutions for people who are differently abled. We know that technology can do multiple great things, but one of the most important things that we need to think about is giving back to the community, right? And what is the best way to utilize the technology that you have learned about to build solutions for those who are lesser blessed than us, right? So think of it in those terms as well. If you haven't been able to submit an idea yet and you're still fiddling around thinking about what could be the different things that you could do, then these are some of the topics that you could that could help you. But apart from this, we also have a category which is open innovation, where you can come up with your own idea, and our mentors will evaluate your idea and see that if it is a good idea and if we can go ahead and it's implementable and definitely brings about some value, then you can submit that as well, right? So you hardly have a day to submit your ideas, and I would request you to go ahead and submit. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be extremely well rounded, right? Just think about any of the problems that you are coming across in your day to day life and how technology can bring about a solution to that, right? Apart from that, I have already emphasized on the timeline. The timeline for submitting the ideas is today. So please go ahead and submit your ideas, form your teammates. If you haven't already formed teams and you don't have teammates from your own college, then you can also go ahead and form teams with others who have registered on Skillenza, right? Use this time to network and kind of broaden your horizon, meet other people, and be able to work with them. Right. So these are the two main things that I wanted to kind of talk about. If you need any help, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Skillenza, and they will put you in touch with our Codeathon team, and we will try to get your get you unblocked as soon as we can. Post the idea submission, there will be an evaluation phase where we will be evaluating your ideas and selecting a couple of ideas that will go ahead next in the product building phase. Now this is where we come in, and today's webinar kind of makes is a really important topic for us to understand. In a product, in the product building umbrella, right, there will be different things that you will come across. But what is the first thing whenever you open a website or whenever you think about a product? If you don't know about the technical specifications of the product, what is the first thing that attracts you, right? Well, for me, it's always the UX, UI, anything that's beautiful looking or anything that's funky to work with. I really get attracted by that and then start wanting to explore the product more, right? And I think that's where our today's webinar by Sanya is going to help you a lot in terms of understanding how can you build a product, and how can you think about the UI UX pieces of it, right? And I'm really happy and glad that Sanya could join us today. Before I hand it over to her, I just want to give a brief introduction about Sanya. Sanya is a product designer at Uber. So you have all seen how the Uber app has evolved over time, and it's a really cool a UI UX, according to me, very minimalistic and very beautiful, right? So of course, she has a lot of pointers to give you. And before Uber, she worked on workplace collaboration tools and also co-founded a startup in the fitness domain. And beyond work, she loves traveling, and she would love to travel to at least 100 countries in her lifetime. And currently, she's at number 12. So I wish her all the best of luck. And Sanya, the stage is yours to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. That was interesting introduction, and I think really interesting topic. I can so relate to it. I think most of the things that we are doing right now at Uber as well is has a lot to do with what changed because of Corona, what happened due to COVID, and how do we cope up with it. So I'm just gonna today talk about how you can do design thinking and like what is the one-on-one 101 for it. And I think it'll be specifically useful for the hackathon. So where you can categorize and divide it into steps and think about like what each step entails and how can you think about your user and build something that would be interesting for them to use. Before we start that, I'll just quickly introduce myself, add like a bit about my journey. So as Jan mentioned, I'm Sanya. I'm working with Uber right now, and I've been here for about a year and a half now. I have been working in the customer obsession as well as the rides sign up domain right now, where we take care of how we provide the right sort of support to our users who are basically our riders and eaters, as well as our earners who are basically drivers and couriers who help us deliver stuff and take you from one place to another. And the other part of where I focus is how the right sign up experience or the login experience should happen for anybody coming onto the Uber platform. So I think these are pretty interesting areas, and I've been working on them for a long time. So I'm just going to take one of those examples also to illustrate how you can think about certain things when you're thinking of a hackathon. And before this, I was working on a work collaboration tool, as Gan was mentioning. I had my own startup. I started off as a jewelry designer because I did a course in NIFT, which is related to product design, furniture, jewelry, watches. So I started off as that, and then I found my interest in UX design, and then I shifted to user experience, did internships in a bunch of startups, and then found my way to my first real job at Sapient. And then I moved to DirectEye, which is which is an Indian company in terms of, which is pretty famous, I think, for their tech and the latest products that they're building. I also tried product management at DirectEye to just like sort of get an overview of how you think holistically about a product. How do you start? How do you define that what needs to be built? And post that, I had my own startup in the fitness domain, and I moved back to design with Uber about a year and a half ago. So I think I've been working for a really, really long time now. Cool. So I think this is a super exciting topic, and I think I'll just start sharing my screen and walk you guys through it. Cool. Hope you guys can see my screen now. So today we're going to be talking about the first, like one of the frameworks that you can utilize for design thinking, specifically useful when you're starting or working in a hackathon. So I have used this framework to create designs or ideate under a day. So at the end of when we go through all these steps, I'm just going to show you one quick snippet of one of the projects that I had done under a day to just sort of give you an understanding, like when you're working for a hackathon, till what level of details probably you should go to, and till what length you should think about it, and how much time probably you should spend on it. So just to talk about this framework, this is called the double diamond approach. So this has 4 phases, and all these are basically related to design, and it overlaps some sort with the product understanding, where we draw and where we get the brief from. So these are the four areas for a double diamond approach. The first one is where we discover and research about the problem. So the first step in itself is when you've defined what you want to do, or you need to understand why do you want to do it and understand the problems behind it. Why, like, just break the brief apart to understand that this is the core crux of the problem, or these are the five things that I'm trying to achieve out of this, and then move on to the actual research. The next step would be where we define and talk about like which areas do we want to focus on, and post that we would move into where we actually develop or ideate the solution, and the final step will be where we deliver or make this actually happen. So I'm going to individually talk about each of these, just talking in terms of details and giving you some examples of how you should basically go about this. So this is basically an empty screen showing you the same framework. This is where you start. This is, say, for example, you're given a problem, or in this hackathon scenario, you are choosing a topic that you want to build for. The first step would be a diverging phase. By diverging, I mean this is where the area where you would be exploring and not like constraining yourself and saying, oh, this is too much. Maybe this is not something we should do. This is a phase where you can explore, go as broad as you want, and think about different things. And the next step would be defining, as I was mentioning. Then that's a converging phase. Now you have diverged and figured out, okay, these are the 20,000 things we can do, and now how do we say that, okay, these are the 5 or 10 that make sense, and let's explore them further. The next step in designing would be to develop, and this is again like a diverging phase where you have like top high level 5 topics or themes that you're going to be thinking about, but then you again think of like multiple ideas around those themes, and that is where again it's a diverging phase. You can have like an n number of concepts towards it, and the last phase will be when you deliver. You'll have to decide those 2 or 3 options that just make maximum amount of sense, or that one option that makes the most sense, where you would want to continue and like make it as your deliverable. So talking about the first stage, that's basically discovery and research. The first step would be where you rip the brief. So you have to question, you have to challenge what you're trying to build, right? You have to understand that a lot of times what we get as a brief, like in the industry, would be at a very high level. Now it's your job to break it. You have to question it. It's not something that we have to just take it as is and start building. That would be a starting point where we try to sort of get a path of how we want to actually build something, or what exactly do we build, why do we build it, etc. So again, the next thing which we would want to do is figure out the characteristics, define areas of interest, figure out the persona and experiences related to it, what has been done already, what exists, what can we leverage, is something that we should be diving deeper into at this point. And before we actually start with the primary and the secondary research, we need to cluster our findings into topics and get an overview. We need to understand like what should we research about, because a topic can be really, really broad. You have to address you have to have a framework in mind in terms of what problems you're trying to solve before you actually start gathering information about it. Just making sure that always will have like a crunch of time or crunch of resources available to do certain things. So we need to be very judicial when we are trying to even think about like what all should we research about. So let's just take an example of something that we are trying to do at Uber. This is very relevant with the existing COVID situation. So what we want to do is that we want to make sure they're virtually able to resolve their issues through different channels. Right now, if you see any driver partner or any courier partner, they go to a physical center where they can get help. But because of Corona, we had to shut most of them. And now they all have to get their issues resolved virtually. So this is again like something that is given to us as a brief. Now let's look into it. How do we start with it? Just to highlight like what actually needs to be done, which is the major areas in this particular brief that we're talking about. It has to be virtual, it has to be fast, it cannot be really slow that we're gonna get back to you in a week or something. That doesn't work in the fields that we work. And at the same time, we need to make sure that the costs have to be low for Uber. So these are the 3 things which we need to focus on while we are designing. The next thing would be where we try to question the brief itself. Like, if you're trying to virtually resolve them, what are the available channels for resolving customer issues? Do we have a list already, or are we planning to create something from scratch? How do earners resolve their issues right now? What are the pain points that they have? What is Uber's pain point currently? And in terms of keeping the cost low, how much does it cost right now? Say, for example, if they're walking in a green light hub, that's what the help center is called. How do we understand the cost, and do we have like a cost per channel available? Do we understand that, okay, this is the upper cap of the cost, we cannot go beyond it? So we need to answer these questions, which were not really given to us as a part of the brief. And at the end, we want to like the holistically, we would love to understand, like, why does Uber want to do it, and what kind of job the earners are trying to accomplish through this. Like, basically, what's the earner's point of view, what's Uber's point of view, and considering everything else. So this just broadens our scope of thinking. You're questioning the entire premise of the thing that you're trying to build, helping you sort of break it down into different questions that you would like to answer. So once you have like questioned the brief, now you understand, like, oh, this is something, like, these are top 10 things that I would like to understand a bit more about before I get started. But the other thing which we would want to know the most about, what's the user like, what do they know, what do they want to get done, etc. So when we talk about a user persona, we want to know some bit about them to understand their perspective, be in their shoes, and try to understand, like, okay, these are the frustrations that they have, or these are their goals and motivations, and what are the things that they want to get done when they're coming to, say, for example, in this case, Uber support. Why are they coming? What is their reason? And what is their tech literacy meter? Specifically, this comes in handy as a question because it's for earners, drivers, and courier partners who may or may not be as well educated as us. So in that case, it plays a very effective role. Now that if we want to shift the physical center to a more virtual center, how do we actually do that with people who have a lower tech literacy? So these are some pointers where you need to consider, because you will not be the user of your product all the time. You have to make sure that you understand the user pretty well before we are making a solution for them, because that's who is going to be using it, and we wouldn't want to set up for failures. That would be a very critical part. The next like, before we actually design an experience, say we want to design a beautiful user experience for somebody who's coming for getting support, but the first thing is to take a step back and understand what happens today, or what happened before COVID. Like, what did they do, what was their entire journey like? So say, for example, in this case, this is one of our users, Maria. She's a delivery partner with Uber Eats, and say she's got signed out of her account, and she wanted to fix this problem. So this is one of the issues where she would be contacting Uber support and trying to basically get signed into her account. So she goes through she thought that it's an easier way to just go to the green light hub and get the resolution. And she opens HelpDot, is basically our platform online where they can take appointments. So she can take an appointment and go to the nearest GLH, which say was 45 minutes away. Even though this seems to be a painful process, this is what the consumers are doing right now. There are so many issues which could have been solved by could have been solved virtually, but again, then we have to keep going and trying to understand why do they not do it, and that would be a part of our research. So this is how you will eventually end up framing the questions of the area that you would want to research more about. The next step would be she visits the nearest GLH and waits in the queue to get her turn to come, and say the GLH agent explain the issues and helps her to sort of get the resolution done. And the next part where we move is that we understand like the brief somewhat, and we have a good idea about the user, but we need to also figure out what does the data say. And sorry, just one second. Okay, sorry. Um, this isn't like sort of geared sort of to give you an understanding of how the GLH contacts. The contacts is effectively any issue type that the user is creating. So we need to understand the data, how many issues are being reported, what kind of issues are being reported, and this is in context with an actual product. This is in context with something that we are actually doing right now, and what's happening and what has happened. And say for example, in this case, we realized that most of the issues that the users are going for was virtually resolvable. That makes our job easy to just sort of see that, okay, yeah, this was virtually resolvable, they were going there for a separate reason. Now we need to understand those reasons, take those into account. But it's very clear that there is another reason that they are going for, and it's not like those type of issues cannot be solved without any physical interaction. So now we would also try to understand from Uber's perspective what could be the cost. Like if we are moving to a specific channel, what would be the benefit there? Say for example, in a phone or anything else, like a chat. Does that help? Should we move to chat? Should we move to phone, etc.? And at the same time, keeping it part that, okay, what makes sense for the user. So these will be some areas that we would have to venture into. Now the part would come where we have to actually figure out what we want to research about. So we know most of the internal stuff about Uber because that has already been validated through the data. And now we need to make sure to complete the picture. We need to understand user side of the story. And the other part, as we were thinking about earlier, was that we know that these problems that the users are facing are something that we can resolve virtually, but why are we not able to resolve them virtually, or what is the user's need behind it? That's an area that we still couldn't understand so well. So this is a bigger chunk of our research will be focused towards understanding this. So this helps us move to the second stage. In the first stage, we were diverging, creating different paths for us to explore and trying to understand. In the second phase, it would be define and synthesis. So it would be where you summarize your raw findings, that whatever we have learned, how do we cluster them into learnings? How do we find insights out of it? Like, what did we learn? What did we understand about customers' motivations and frustrations? And then how do we build an opportunity area around it? How do we effectively make sure that there is something that needs to be done? Or these are 5 areas that I'm going to be focusing on. And the last one would be where we think about how might we questions, how might we address certain concerns of the users. That would help us form questions in a way which figures out like these are the top 3 questions that I want to answer, effectively converging the multiple thoughts that we have had till now. So just going through some examples for this phase. So we have just got done with our research, and so let's see what did we find out about the drivers. Say for this was one of the insights that we got, that the discovery in-app help was poor, and that's why they preferred going to GLH or like the physical health center, rather than it being an issue type concern, or it being like they had certain issues that they had to go or travel for to get help. So that was an interesting insight, that if we solve certain areas in the app itself, it would just start making sense for our earners, and they won't have to travel. And they were asking basic tech questions and tech issues there, which was something again that we need to think about, that if it's just for those questions, how does it make sense for them to go there? The other issue which we figured out was tech literacy, as we were mentioning about earlier, that people who are belonging to this earner family for Uber, they do not have as great education, specifically in countries like Mexico and India, where the tech literacy is quite lower. So we have to understand that how do we make sure that people can get a better understanding and get a easier grasp of things when it comes to a technology based health solution. And one of the other things which we got to know was they were just always so used to going to the health center that they didn't even consider taking other options. So that was something, these were like the high level insights. We did have like buttload of more insights, but the idea was that just to show you guys that these will be some sort of high level understanding of the user when you try to research or when you try to basically interview them, do focus studies with them. In case of hackathon, what I would recommend is that you should have these insights even though you're not able to talk to the actual users. You can put yourself in those shoes and try to answer some of those questions, so that you have that persona built, you have those research findings with you. When you're defining the designs, it really comes in handy, because those will be like your guarding principles. Those will help you build the blocks when you're trying to create an effective format of designing the next set. So in terms of, once we have gathered, say, all the insight, like say the research, we have findings, now we are going to be putting them in terms of themes and use cases. So for example, we figured out there's an issue with search and navigation, the content doesn't seem right, the accessibility is a concern specifically for low tech literacy user, and there has to be an effective way of channel routing. So these could be the guiding themes around which you would like to explore your designs. And then once you have these themes in place, you can figure out like what kind of questions, like what are the top high level 3 questions. It could be either or as well. You could just have like 2 themes, 3 themes, and then start building towards it. This just helps you put those questions into perspective to find the relevant answer. For example, in this case, how might we make the issues or topics easier to discover, since discovery is one of the biggest problem that we are facing with the earners. How can we make sure that we provide them easier topics or easier discovery? So this is just to fill the initial chart that we were seeing. This basically ends the define phase. Now we have come up with like 3 questions or 3 themes that we want to focus on, and what are the 2-3 opportunity areas that we would be now diverging to design actually. So this is how that entire first part of the double diamond approach consists. It's just to summarize, you started by ripping the brief, you clustered the topics, we did primary and secondary research. That's the part of the diverging principle. And now we're moving on to converging them. Now we are trying to take all the raw findings, converge them into insights. Once we have insights, we try to converge them into themes, and then we get the opportunity area and how might we questions out of them. Now moving on to the next phase where we develop and deliver. So in this case, this constitutes of 2 things. You ideate and you evaluate. So ideation would be just, you do not have to restrain yourself. Now you have, say, for example, in terms of search and navigation, what all can you potentially do? You need to think about like, okay, does adding a search box make sense? Or adding a chat bot where you can type in your message make sense, rather than having you to discover any of these topics or go through multiple lines or multiple topics to figure out what you're looking for. So that could be one way where you're thinking about it. Could be other way, how we can stack them contextually, because we understand that like there would be certain topics which are accessed more, should we provide them upfront, etc. So that could be an interesting way to think about now these themes. And the second part of it is evaluation. Towards the end of the ideation phase, you would like to evaluate your ideas and select which ones make sense. I think one of the interesting ways also to do it would be dot mapping. So basically you can effectively sit with your team and put dots on the ideas that you like. Each one of you can say get 5 dots, and all of you put pins on those ideas which you like. And as a result, you would have like top fleshed 5 ideas which makes the most sense to all of your team members, and giving you like a clear direction in terms of what makes sense. Just to give you an example, this is again not connected with exactly this, but to just give you like, you should have like experience principles where you would want to define what kind of things are determining the design. We want to go for more automation, not action in this scenario. That would effectively mean that we would want them not to find so many things. We would want to automate most of the things. If, say, for example, we at Uber understand that this could be a potential concern for the earners, then we would automatically try to solve it for them rather than them having to reach out to us. Say, for example, their driving license has expired and we know about it, and we know that this is one of the things that they would need help with. We could just reach out proactively and provide that kind of support. We would try to make better connections in terms of how do we communicate better, how do we make sure that there is a better communication channel. Say, for example, for sorry, say for example, there has to be chat available, for example there has to be phone call available at certain times, and during driving, is it okay for them to give us a voice message? So these could be interesting things which you could think about, uh, uh, just as a guiding principle to what you're designing. And so the next step for us is to brainstorm and create concepts. As I was talking about, this is the part of the whole diverging theme again, where you're ideating and designing and trying to figure out what concepts you need to pull. So I've just tried to brainstorm, like say for example in search and navigation, should we have search, should we have chatbot? Say for example in terms of content, we can think about formatting the content better or making it more snackable. In terms of accessibility, should we try the experience of a video call? Does that help the owner? Does it make sure that they're able to converse and talk about what their real problems are? And in terms of channel routing, what would be an ideal solution? Should we let the owners decide like which channel they want to be routed to, or should we be cognizant of that and we make sure that the owner doesn't have to do so many steps, and we can just decide that okay, for this particular issue you should get a phone call, for this particular issue since it's not so urgent, maybe I can reply to you on a day, just making sure that all the urgent needs are being taken care of. So this would be something that helps you think and brainstorm. As I was talking earlier, we can do a dot exercise where you can basically everybody in your team get different colored dots and they can choose which ideas makes the most sense. And then it could be the phase where the next phase would be where you start prototyping them and designing them and seeing okay, yeah, this is how it looks like when it comes to life. That brings us to the last stage. It's about delivering and implementation. So under this we have build, like basically you build a prototype, you analyze if it makes sense or not. In the analyze step, it could be either through experimentation where you actually release it. So we do this a lot where we actually release an experiment to a short percentage or to a small percentage of our users and see how are they interacting with it, how are they using it, and then effectively scale it. The other way to go about it, which could be useful for you guys, would be quick and dirty user testing. Once you have created say mocks and designs, you can potentially create a click-through prototype through Figma or Sketch or InVision, and let anybody else in, like sitting next to you, use it, or ask any of your friends to sort of use it and see how they are enjoying it, or if they find any potential issues. This is a very great way to get feedback and analyze what makes sense, what doesn't make sense for the users. And the last step would be where you iterate. The feedback that you're going to get through all these different means helps you make this better, move to the next version of it, and then you can keep iterating. I think we always go with the MVP approach, where we launch the minimum viable prototype and then move on to keep creating versions as version 1, version 2, based on user feedback, based on our understanding of the data. So all this keeps coming in. This might be something that you would face when you are actually working for a company and you keep iterating and working on the same product to make it better. So I would always suggest that keep prototyping, keep testing, and keep repeating the same, because I think at the end of the day, we cannot perfect our solutions immediately, but if we keep getting feedback on it, if we keep letting our users try and test it and tell us more about it, that's the way to go. Just one last thing about this, I highly recommend when you move into if you end up designing something, if you are actually a part of the design team, I would highly recommend you to think about designing a system, design systems that scale, and you effectively design components and make sure that they can be used at multiple places. Say, for example, in terms of a chatbot, you define these 10 components, and that could be, say, used across in all the use cases, effectively making sure that you don't have to end up designing each flow for them. So this is just a designer tip for us. And I think this is where I wanted to show you one of the examples which I had done under a day to just sort of show you that what can we think about when it comes to a hackathon like this. Say, for example, this was one of the prompts given to me where I had to design experience for a San Francisco traveler who's landed at a San Francisco International Airport and needs to find her checked-in baggage. So the idea was to figure out how can we navigate the user to the checked-in baggage and what kind of experience we can provide them. So the assumptions that we have taken here is, we will definitely, like right now, what you would do is take certain assumptions into mind when you're designing for this hackathon, because you cannot go out and do the extensive research. So it would be that we would take certain assumptions into account, and then we would basically define like what approach we're taking. In this case, I've taken as an example that would be again the double diamond approach. So just starting with the discovery phase, how do you rip the brief? So we need to say sort of understand what the users are currently finding, how are they finding their luggage currently, and if they're satisfied with the current solution or not. Then I'm just skimming through it. I hope you guys are following. This is just to show you the extent of which I would recommend when you're working in a hackathon to just go through, not go in too details because I guess you would not have the time, but sort of get an understanding at a high level where what the user wants and why are you doing it, so that it's easier for you to define certain features. It's easier for you to decide in the set of 10 features that are competing. Just make sense. Okay, yeah, my user is like this feature would make the most sense for him, so that makes your life a little easier. So jumping back to this, so we would come up with an hypothesis of why the user wants it and why is the current system not efficient, and trying to understand the user. I would highly recommend to do an existing journey mapping. If you have, say, think about a product which you are trying to design right now, and what is the existing alternate to it. There must be something that the users are already doing. If you see and try to illustrate their current journey, it would help you with a bundle of opportunities that you should make better, because that would give you the highlights of the users pain points in a certain way. Then, as I was mentioning, this is an example of a user persona. So you can mention about the goals of the user, the motivations, the frustrations, talk about the user. And this was basically help you, again, define and really make your experience crisp, because now you know who are you designing for, which makes a lot of difference when you're trying to basically understand the user and not just making decisions based on what you think is right. It's just basically that helps you helps you to remember that there's somebody else in picture. And say, for example, in this scenario, if you say you always talk like, hey, Sonal would want this, if Sonal was here, she would want it that way or this way, etc., helping you just like sort of personify the set of segment of users that you're designing for, and just everybody, it's easier for everybody to advocate and talk in a language like that. And moving on to research highlights, this is something that I did by talking to three of my friends who travel a lot. This comes in handy since you do not have so much time to spend on it, but still would like to get some perspective from other people. Like you can talk about, in this case, if I'm trying to find a luggage belt, how much time do the travelers end up spending about in today, like say 15 minutes, and then how can we further reduce it? how do we make sure that they can identify the right bag, how many bags look alike, etc. So we can just try to understand the sort of concerns that users have and then try to validate it with 2 or 3 people. Given the time span, this would be a great way to sort of give you some better insights beyond your own perspective. As I was talking about earlier, understanding the entire system is really important of how things work today, and how can we at what different points of it we can leverage different ideas around it. This is basically the use case or the theming of how we are thinking of solving. I would highly recommend for you guys to read about jobs to be done. This is another framework of how do you write use cases, how do you define what the user is here to do, and figure out what is the primary job, what is the secondary job, and what is the tertiary job. In this, when I'm trying to say this, I mean that what are the 2 things that the user wants the most, and that effectively becomes a part of your MVP experience, and the rest on could be the enhancements that you keep thinking about. But this would help you segregate and rank things again, like sort of creating the opportunity area stack ranking that you needed to build. In context of your hackathon, it would be something that if you're trying to create a medical, like say a hospital tracker for something that I can go to if I'm corona positive, or if I want to get the test done, say for example, that's one of the product that you're trying to define. We would need to understand like what is my primary role. All I need to do is find a hospital and a way to it, and rest everything where could be secondary, like appointments could be primary, because that could be something that I'm concerned about today. Right now, today I don't really know where can I go to, and the government sites are not that great. How do I figure out that opportunity, and what are those set of roles that we would need to sort of fill in? That would be something that we would need to do. Moving on to the next phase, how do we basically define and revisit the job stories once you have done ripping of the brief apart, and once you've understood like what kind of research has already been done? I try to redefine my brief by saying that these are all the things I'm considering now. It's not just virtual support. Now I'm thinking of voice as well. How can I enable, say, to this context, it could be like how can I enable her to find the exact time of her luggage when say it's coming, and in between that time she could do something else, etc. So it could be an interesting way of how do you redefine the brief that has been given to us, and or we have chosen for ourselves, because when we were choosing that particular brief or the area, we did not understand it so thoroughly. Now, since we have spent so much time on it, we understand it a little better. And the last step would be, actually the second last step would be to design. How do you explore ideas? So it could be either in the way of something like this, where you start to sort of create UIs to express your ideas. It could be a pen and paper, sketching it out. I think for hackathons, sketching it out would be perfect, where you just draw a rectangle and make sure that this is basically done. And moving on to the next thing, these are some of the other explorations which you can potentially do. Create users journey map. So this could be done on a scrappy pen and paper, where you define the entire journey of the user. How are you trying to make it better with the kind of things that you're doing, and the final design for the user flow. So you basically define, given all these things that you've taken into consideration, you in the end finally define the final flow that you think makes the most sense, and define different scenarios of it. And I've just listed down the challenges I had and the success matrix. I think it's very interesting for you to in the end consider this as well. If you have time, it would be great for you to see that how are you going to gauge the success out of it, if these many numbers of people are using it, or the frequency is this, or the depth of use is this, or the efficiency / satisfaction is this. So I think this is something I did under 10 hours, just to give you a brief understanding of how you can approach certain things to make sure that even if you're doing a small hackathon for a short period of time, how could you basically involve all these different steps of design to make sure that you are creating the right experience. So I hope that was helpful, and I'm happy to take any questions if we have, Shubham.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Thanks a lot for such an informative session. Uh, we have questions. So, what tools shall I use for UX slash UI?
I highly recommend Figma. That's what I have been using for a year and a half, but I think Sketch is also good. So I think these two tools are extremely easy to use and quite easy to create wireframes. If not, and if you want to go extremely basic, then Balsamic is a tool where you can create scrappy wireframes and just sort of discuss ideas because the components are already sort of available in that.
Okay. Uh, yeah. So the last date of submission is it starts. Submission starts from 17th August and it's till 15th September. So yeah. All right.
Yeah, Shubham, that is the second phase, right? The ideation phase is ending today, right?
Yeah, yeah, additional phase is ending. So the building phase, the last. This is for the last day for the
Or
submission.
submission of the project itself. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the last day for ideation submission is tomorrow. I mean, so
16th.
yeah, 16th and 59. So do we need to know coding? One question is there, Sanya.
Sorry?
So do we need to know coding for designing a UI UX?
Oh no, not really. I don't know how to code. So I've managed. But yeah, no design is required to know coding. If you know it, if you like to do it, it's perfectly fine. But there are prototyping tools available for us, like InVision, which is on a basic version, but you can go to Principle, or Figma in itself. You provides you a great way of creating interactive prototypes, which you could have otherwise earlier done through coding. So that tool is already available for us, making our lives easier. So I would say it's not needed.
So yeah, so do you have any cheat book or reference sheet which we can refer for building UX? So like
I would
something.
highly recommend this entire like the double diamond approach. You can I could share some articles around it, and either I would recommend, like I have done, like followed these principles through the sort of case studies I have listed in my website also. In case that's helpful, you guys can go there and check out, and I would try to find some other resources if that's helpful. But my go-to guide is generally this framework, where I have it very clear that which phase I'm in, and I try to define the timelines according to this, saying that okay, I am in the discovery phase, so this is the time where I would always be expanding on the ideas and not constraining myself. My entire Figma would be filled with different sort of ideas, and then would be how I move on to the next step. So I would say just Google double diamond approach, and you'll get tons of articles around it.
All right.
Awesome.
I
There's one question around if my college is not in tier 2 or tier 3 city. Unfortunately, this
yeah.
contest or this hackathon is open only for those colleges in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So if your college does not fall under that, then we will not be accepting the submissions. Yeah.
Submissions, yeah. I was just replying it over the comment
Oh,
section.
okay, okay. I
Cool.
saw that. I just
All
checked.
right. Okay. I guess so. I guess we are done. I mean, and then we are on time also.
Cool. I think this is great, and I hope that this is of some help.
Yeah, I
And
mean, and plus, like students, they would be watching it after this also. We'll be uploading it over our platform. so they can refer it there also. Yeah.
Definitely. I would be more than happy to connect with you all on LinkedIn and just help you in case you need any help in terms of connections or any other questions that I can answer for you guys.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thanks,
a lot,
Shubham.
Sanya.
Thanks, Shubham.
Thanks a lot, Jan, for joining us. I'll just drop in Sanya's LinkedIn handle.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to connect. Yeah. All right. Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot, Sanya.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks everyone for
Bye.
joining.